In this lesson, we will talk about text. We will see how to add 2D and 3D text into our 3D scenes. In the previous HTML lesson, we learned how to add text on top of it, inside our HTML DOM. We saw that we could make it as if it was integrated into our 3D scene, but it was still HTML elements. But what we will learn is how to add 2D and 3D text into the canvas directly. This way it will be better integrated into our 3D scene, for example to respond to lighting, shadows, and to be hidden or shown correctly. You just need to be aware that the text we will render inside the canvas won't be indexed by search engines. So based on your project, sometimes you will need to avoid using that solution. Let's start by the simplest one, adding 2D text into our scene. Let's try on the wooden sign to write Hyrule Castle. The container of the wooden sign is this group here. We will add our text into it. We can use the text component from React 3 Dry. Inside we need to add our text, Hyrule Castle. And it also requires a material to render our text. Mesh standard material. We define the color to one that I choose, which is a brown to fit with the wooden sign. We close the tag. Now we have the 2D text inside our group, so it follows its rotation and position, but we need to fine-tune the position to put it here. But you can see it's really well embedded into the scene. If I go behind, I can see it. If I go on the side, it really looks like it is a part of the scene. To size correctly our text, we can use the font size property, let's say 0.3. and adjust its position. We set it to 0, 1.2 and 0. This is fine for the height, but we need to advance it on the z-axis. Let's try with 0.01. It looks better. We want to avoid it to overflow our sign. We can add the max width property. Let's set it to 1. Now it's going to a new line when it overflows. And we need to center the text. We can do it with text align and center. Fine, it looks like an old video games, but I would prefer to use a medieval font. I found this font on Google Fonts named Medieval Sharp. Let's download the family because we need the file. We don't need just to import the CSS file. Then the file that we downloaded, we will add it in public, a new folder named fonts, and we drag and drop it. Our file here is a TTF. 3JS support TTF, OTF, and WOF, not WOF2. If your file is not from the correct format, you can use a font converter like fontconverter.io and convert it to one of the supported format. Because it is rendered by 3JS and not from your browser like in CSS, you don't need to load multiple file formats, just one is enough. To use our font file, let's copy its name. And in font, we pass the path, which is fonts, because it's in public, so it's the root folder, and medieval sharp-regular.ttf. Now we have our nice medieval font. As always, when you need to load resources, be careful that the file format is not too big and to not load too many different fonts. That could slow down the loading of your page. Let's add the name of our character on top of it, like in video games. Let's add it in the container group, so it's relative to its position. We'll add a text. It will be link. We will render it inside a mesh standard material with a black color. Let's add a subtitle below. Zelda Personal Hero. We can set its color to gray. We need to adjust it a little bit, put it on top of the head and reduce its size. Because they will be tied to each other, let's wrap them in a group with a Y position of 3. And change the font size for both of them. 0.2 and 0.2. Okay, not bad. Now we need to positionate the link title on top of the Zelda Personal Hero. What we can do is to change the Y position and set it on top of Zelda Personal Hero. But let's add a lot of text. The link hello, 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 and set the max width to 1 also. Well, I spaced it too much. I need to add more hello. Let's duplicate it twice and maybe reduce a bit the Y position. Now you can see it's overlapping the Zelda Personal Hero. We can avoid it easily using the anchor, which is especially useful when you have dynamic text and you can control the position manually. Instead, we will just say anchor Y, because it's on the y-axis that our problem occurs. We will say bottom. Now you can see that even by removing the Y position, it positioned it here. We need to set the Zelda Personal Hero Anchor Y to top, because the default value is center and they are a bit conflicting with each other. Now they are spaced perfectly and we didn't even touch with the position Y. We can now remove the link, so if it's a dynamic text, and still it's positioned correctly. We also don't need the max width. And if you want to know the anchor X is the same, you just need to adjust center, left or right instead of center, top and bottom. In video games, it's common to always have the text facing our camera. Here it disappears. We can use the billboard component for this. Instead of wrapping them into a group, we can use the billboard component from dry. Now it's always facing our camera. We can go behind. We always see our text correctly. By the way, you can use the billboard component on everything. It is not related to text. So if you need something to face your camera, wrap it into a billboard. Now that we have covered the essentials of displaying 2D text, let's display 3D text behind our character and the sign. First of all, there is no default font available for 3D text, which means we have to start by it. But the file format for a 3D font is different. It's named a typeface format. We can use facetype.js tool to convert our font into a typeface format. This time, let's download the Interfont from Google Fonts, download family, then choose for the thickness you want. I choose Interbold and hit convert. But if you take a look at the size of the generated JSON file, it's 1.2 megabyte. It's way too much. It is because by default, it is generating the font for all available characters, like special characters and digits. There is an option available here to restrict the character set. We can write only the letters we want to use. I just set it to A to Z in lowercase and A to Z in uppercase letter. Let's convert it again. And now the file is only 19 kilobytes, which is way better. Now we can use it inside our project. Drag and drop it into the fonts folder. And let's create a text 3D component outside of all the other components. Text 3D, it's also coming from dry. We will write Zelda as if it was the cover of a video game. And the mesh standard material to render our text. Of course, you can use other kind of materials as for any mesh. I chose a nice green and we can close the material. We need to add the path to the font, font/inter_bold.json. Let's rotate it on the y-axis. We'll be using 3.mathutils to make a rotation, deg to rad, of 30 degrees. We can adjust its size. Let's put it to 4 to make it very big. And its position. Let's put it behind with -8, 0, and -5. We now have this nice text in the background. It also generates shadows thanks to contact shadows, but it's a bit too thin. To increase the depth, we can use the bevel property with bevel enabled. It's a boolean, so we don't have to say it's equal to true. And we can change the thickness of it using bevel thickness. Let's set it to 0.5. Now it's way more convincing. Let's reload to see how it looks. It looks very nice. Beveling can also help us sharpening the angle, so we can use bevel size, set it to 0.1. And now the text is way less sharp, and you can see it is rounding the edges. But because the number of segments isn't high, we can see the bevel faces here. To avoid to see it, we can increase the number of segments, set it to 10. If we look closely, we can still see there are some of them, but if we look from our position, it doesn't appear. So we don't need to go too hard on this effect, because as always, the lower the value, the best it is for the performance, as long as it doesn't impact the looking of it. You will never zoom that way to the text, so you can keep that low value for bevel segments. The generated 3D text is like any other meshes that you created with Three.js. You can add it to your collection of tools to make your experience looks way more better. Don't forget to practice to get used to it, and to always look at the documentation to dive deeper into the concept that we learned together.